I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. We are celebrating 200 episodes today.
Yes.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and get started a little bit. I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And obviously, welcome to From the Woods Today. And we have a new look.
We have a new look to celebrate 200 episodes.
Can you imagine?
I mean, if we were on television, we'd be syndicated at this point. You know, so
it's 200 episodes.
Yeah, we've been together a long time. And we've got two of our favorite
guests on today. Yeah, we really do.
Yeah, glad to have you all with us. Thank you for being part of this 200th episode celebration. We're going to be talking with Dr. Jonathan Larson here in a little bit. He's going to be talking about something that people are hearing a lot of
and talking about all the time.
Yeah, so we'll get to that in a second. And then we'll have Dr. Ellen Crocker with us as well. And it's that time of year when you start seeing a lot of stuff happening to your trees and stuff. We're starting to get a lot of emails and phone calls and images people are sending in. So Dr. Crocker is going to be talking about some of that stuff. But we're glad to have you all with us today. If you have questions for our presenters, please use the chat function. If you're on YouTube, you can hit us up via email at forestry.extension@uky.edu and we can respond that way. But Renee, I'm just so excited to be with you on our 200th episode.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Dr. Larson, if you'd like to join in. Hi, welcome to the show again.
Greetings.
Thank you.
And let's see. What is he talking about? But everybody
I've had his phone has been ringing off the hook.
Yes.
Yeah. I've done a lot of conversations about periodical cicadas this year. I've done a lot of media about periodical cicadas this year. It's definitely been the number one bug so far. Knock on wood that holds out. I don't want to get like a surprise thing that pops up at any point and takes over the championship role, but it's definitely been a huge topic of discussion, and it started all the way back in February. It seemed like people were already kind of on top of this. They were all about wanting to know what was going to happen, and they just had all these questions about what in the world was going to happen with periodical cicadas this year. So you want me to just kind of jump in and
I think it'd be great. I was going to say, Dr. Larson, I have seen your name and some of your words and all that media out there. So yeah, it's neat to see you representing us so well. So thank you.
It's been very funny. I had one of these media people, they were like, how did you get roped into this? Like, why are you a periodical cicada content expert? And I was like, I don't know. I think it's just because I'm willing to do it. I've never studied these. Like I'm not a
step up, right? You're a resident entomologist.
I'm the person that's willing to chat about cicadas. That's why.
I love it.
Yeah. So the big thing this year is the double brood emergence. This is what a lot of people have been kind of terming it. If they're being nice, if they're not being nice, they're calling it cicada apocalypse or cicada-geddon. It's this thought that there's just going to be a ton of these insects out and about here in 2024. And it is true, we have a double brood emergence. There's two sets of periodical cicadas coming out this year, and they're doing so pretty much simultaneously. It's not impossible for double broods to occur. We've had multiples of them over the years. I think some back in 2014 and 2012, but they're usually much smaller groups. And it's spread from southern Wisconsin all the way down into Georgia. So it's just a huge geographic footprint that we're seeing these broods come out in. They're not mixed together. They are distinct, but they're coming out at the same time. So it is kind of magical. It is kind of interesting. And I was just going to show kind of some of the differences between these cicadas and the annual cicadas that most people are familiar with. I want to talk specifically about what periodical cicadas are. What is a double brood emergence? What is a brood? It sounds very science fiction-y, right? To be talking about broods, it almost sounds like alien. It's going to come out and get you. So why do we use that terminology and what does it mean? If this is going to happen in Kentucky this year and next year, when and where should you expect that? Talk a little bit more specifically about the 13 and 17-year phenomenon that we have with these. Why are they so loud? Why do they sing so much? And then aside from being loud, do they pose a pest problem to Kentuckians and to others? So that's kind of what I wanted to cover today. These are what we call magic cicadas that are coming out this year. That is their actual scientific genus name. It is very evocative of their biology. It really speaks to the fact that they appear magically every 13 or 17 years. So you're looking at a cicada, a periodical cicada here. This gives you just kind of a good overview of their basic look. They are dark black in color. They typically have kind of copper colored legs, bright red eyes, and like all cicadas, they hold their wings tent-like over their abdomen. And their wings are interesting because they have kind of this orange tinge to the tips. And these are below ground as a nymph, so a wingless form of this insect, for 13 or 17 years before they come to the surface in droves as adults. They're the longest living insect in North America, some of the longest lived insects in the world. They are teenage bugs, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon to think about. Within the genus Magic Cicada, there are multiple species. So when we talk about periodical cicadas, you're talking about 3 species of 17-year cicadas and then 4 species of 13-year cicadas. These that you're looking at here are 17-year cicadas. In order to differentiate between these, we do use some visual cues, including size. You can see some size variation between the 3 species here. We also use the color of banding on the bottom side of the abdomen. You can see some are more black and more orange. But the big thing is really auditory differences. They sing different songs, and this is what speciates them. This is what keeps them from crossing over with one another. And helps them to maintain their kind of species integrity. So they actually have very distinct favorite types of music. They are not going to mate with somebody that's singing the wrong song. So just a quick overview of the 17-year cicadas. The first one is septendecim, which just means 17 years. It's the largest and most northern of the 17-year species. We typically identify these by their call. Their call sounds like someone saying the word Pharaoh over and over again. It's very loud. I'll try to play some songs here in a little bit, and you can listen for that. But it's very low pitched and kind of Pharaoh over and over. We can also look on the bottom side of the abdomen. They have orange bands on their belly, and then this kind of orange streak, a little bit of war paint between the eye and the top of the wing. So these are not going to be out in Kentucky this year, but they will be next year. You can see these 17-year ones. This is Cassini. This is the dwarf periodical cicada. So they're smaller than the Pharaoh species. They have all black abdomens, and they make a bursting call. So it's quite loud. It kind of pops out with a really loud noise. And then it's followed by several clicks that come afterwards. Then we have Septendecula, also known as the little 17-year cicada. It's similar in size to Cassini. They have all black abdomens with very thin orange stripes, and they make kind of a ticking call when they're up in the trees preparing to mate. So there's also 4 species of 13-year cicadas. These are what are out in Western Kentucky this year. 13-year cicadas are a group that split from their 17-year cousins, thousands of years ago. We believe the 17 years came first. And then in southern climates, as it got warmer, some of them were able to develop faster. And then they ended up becoming this distinct set of cicadas that use 13 rather than 17-year cycles underground. Their names are very tied to the 17-year species. So these are just the 13-year variants kind of the 17th. So we start with tridecim. That just means 13 years, 13-year cicada. This one has an underside of their abdomen that's almost completely orange. Some people say it looks very caramel colored, and I'll be using some food analogies today. We'll see if I can ruin any of the food for you, but it does have that kind of similar hue to it. This is Neotridecim. This is the new 13-year cicada. This is one of the more interesting ones because it was only discovered in 1998. It was confirmed in 2000 during another emergence as a new species. There used to be 3 of each kind, 3 17 and 3 13s, one for each species that kind of split off from each other. But with this one, we do have a new group, very caramel colored on the bottom side as well. The big difference between this and tridecim is the song. They have a distinctive song that's just slightly different. It's very hard for our ears to hear it, but the cicadas can hear it, and it helps them to become a separate species. We also have Triticasini. This is the 13-year version of the other Cassini. All black abdomen, make a static-like call in the trees. These are Tridecula, the little 13-year cicada. They're smaller. They have all black abdomens with thinner orange bands again and make that ticking call, similar to the Septendecula. So that's the speciation. There are more than one kind of periodical cicada, but for most people, it's sufficient enough to know, okay, there's these jet black cicadas. They're out and about earlier in the year. They're making a lot of noise. They're teenagers, and we don't like them. Many people don't. I like to point this out because every time this occurs, we get a lot of people that ask questions that are essentially, why are you acting like this is special or different or weird or unique? There are cicadas every year. Why do we care that there's these other cicadas? And it is true that we have annual cicadas. These are different than the periodicals. They're different species. They're different, part of different genera. They have a very different way of developing. They're only below ground for 2 to 3 years, but there's so many overlapping generations of them that we get emergences every year. They tend to be green, brown, and black in color, like you see here. They tend to be larger compared to periodical cicadas, so much bigger and stouter, and they are associated with a different time of year. These are the sounds of summer, truly. Annual cicadas come out in the middle of summer. Some of them are known as dog day cicadas because they come out during the dog days of summer. We also have harvest flies. That's another type of cicada because they're out and about when the corn or the soybeans are coming down. So there's lots of differences here, and it is special and unique to have a periodical cicada year because they come out earlier, they look very different, and then they have this exaggerated 13 or 17-year life cycle. The two broods that you've been hearing about that are creating this large cicada footprint this year are brood 13, which is a group of 17-year cicadas. Unfortunately, the name is a bit confusing. And then brood 19, which is a group of 13-year cicadas. So brood 13 is up in northern Illinois and a little further to the north. Brood 19 is spread across much of the south. As I kind of mentioned before, dual emergences are relatively rare. We don't have them every year, but they can occur. The reason that it's rare is we have these two prime numbers, the 13 and the 17, so they just don't overlap very frequently. This pair in particular has not emerged together since the year 1803 when Thomas Jefferson was president. So this particular pairing is really rare, and it is very widespread. Just a little more detail on each of them. So brood 13 is a group of 17-year cicadas that historically have lived mostly in Illinois. They're also known as the Northern Illinois brood, but they're also in southern Wisconsin and Iowa. There are some small patches of them left in Indiana. There used to be some in Michigan, but it's currently believed that those have been extirpated, that they no longer live in Michigan. So mainly focused on Illinois for this. The insects that are coming out this year were born in the year 2007. Just some highlights that year. We had the first rumblings of the housing crisis in the United States. The iPhone hit the market. So if you're a big iPhone user, these bugs were born the same year that Steve Jobs unveiled that piece of technology. It's also the year that Google Street View became a thing. If you use Google Maps and you've ever gone down on the Street View, that this was born then, and it was coinciding with these cicadas. This map is from 1922. You'll notice there is a dot in Kentucky. It's currently believed that that is erroneous, that this was associated with a different brood. We are not a part of brood 13. We are, on the other hand, a part of brood 19. So brood 19 is called the Great Southern Brood. It's a group of 13-year cicadas that spread across a huge swath of the southeastern United States and even extends northward into Illinois and a little bit into Iowa. In Kentucky, as of the last emergence in 2011, there were only 4 confirmed counties back then: Allen, Caldwell, Christian, and Trigg. That doesn't mean they don't exist in other counties. In fact, this year I've already received reports from McCracken County and a couple of others that were not a part of our initial assessment that we thought we would get. And so if you see these cicadas, if you live out in the Pennyrile or Purchase region, you could help to contribute to better understanding of periodical cicadas. by uploading data through an app that I'm going to show you here in a second. These ones did come out in 2011, the same year that the United States went after bin Laden, the same year that Minecraft was born, just some historical highlights from that year. And they've been developing underground ever since and are emerging this year. We have multiple broods that live in Kentucky. I would actually say Kentucky's kind of a hotbed for periodical cicadas. So brood 19 is just one example that's coming out this year in 2024. You may remember brood X or brood 10 that came out in 2021, just a few short years ago. The next big emergence that we're going to have is in 2025. So just next year, we're going to have brood XIV that's going to come out, or brood 14. And this is going to cover a bunch of the state of Kentucky. So this is just a map that shows you kind of the counties we expect to see this in historically and based on what happened the last time. Some of these broods have common names like the Northern Illinois brood or the Great Southern brood. I think over the next year, I'm going to push really hard to try and get brood 14 to be known as the bluegrass brood, maybe the bourbon brood, I don't know, the wildcat brood. That seems kind of exclusive to University of Kentucky. I want it to be named after our state because it's just so concentrated here. We could possibly see some of these cicadas in central and eastern Kentucky this year. Sometimes cicadas miscount and they come out a year early. We call them early risers. That could happen this month and next month, and it could look like it's a part of the double brood emergence, but it's actually just somebody that's a part of brood 14 that miscounted and came out a little bit early. So if you feel like you're missing out because everything's happening in Western Kentucky, just hold your horses. The cicada tourism industry is coming to the rest of Kentucky next year in 2025. The broods that I've been referring to, these are simply the groups in which we place the cicadas by their emergence year. This is a distribution map from the University of Connecticut that shows where the cicada broods are. There are currently 12 groups of 17-year cicadas and 3 groups of 13-year cicadas. These broods are separated temporally. They don't emerge all at the same time, and so we get this stratification by calendar year. And that's how we're able to separate these out. And they don't really cross over very much. They're distinct zones. People have asked with the double brood emergence, well, are they overlapping? Are they going to interbreed? And the truth is that there's a little border area around Springfield, but by and large, they are not mingling with one another. They're not connected in the air. So they're just sort of happening at the same time. We're not going to see them really kind of physically interacting with each other because they are so separated by their brood year. So that's just one way of kind of explaining this. This was invented by an entomologist named Charles Marlatt in the early 1900s. He was the one that kind of perfected this system. You can help us to better understand the periodical cicadas of Kentucky. If you would like to help update these maps so that we have a better snapshot of what occurs in our state, you can download Cicada Safari. It's from a university in Ohio, Mount St. Joseph University in Cincinnati. There's a researcher there named Gene Kritsky, who's kind of the guru for periodical cicadas. And they put together this app, and you take a picture, it'll have a geotag, you upload it, and then your picture is populated to the map. And it's a lot like iNaturalist, if you've ever used that, except only for cicadas. You get on the leaderboard, you can win. I don't know if they give you a prize if you upload the most photos, but then they can give these maps to people like myself, and we can better update the people of Kentucky about where we expect this to happen again in the future. This is a very hard insect to do scientific research on because you only get a shot at them every 13 or 17 years. So there's very few people who have ever specialized on them. And having citizen science like this really helps going forward to know where and when they are. So why do they take, these are some of the big questions that we get. Why do they take 13 or 17 years to develop? The current consensus is that this is an attempt to avoid predator or parasitoid specialization. They do this in these prime number years because this means that there is no bird that only eats periodical cicadas. There's no wasp or fly that only lays their eggs inside of periodical cicadas because they're just too sporadic of a resource. In terms of how do they know when 13 or 17 years have passed, they're able to count the passage of seasonal sap changes, their food resource in the root zone in which they live underground. As it moves to and from them, They can sort of physically log that. They're not scratching a line on the side of the wall in the underground cell that they live in. It's just more of a clock that ticks in their head. And once 13 or 17 of these occurrences have happened, it's just a biological alarm clock that sort of tells them it's time to go to the surface. And they do miscount. They can come out a year early. They can come out a year late. They can even come out up to 4 years late. We have 13-year cicadas that show up 17 years after they were born. We know they're 13 years based on the sounds and physical attributes. They just were really bad at counting, unfortunately, and came out quite late. Why do they come out in these huge numbers? We call this predator satiation. When the cicadas start to emerge, everything in the forest, everything in the environment that they're in, the park, wherever it is that they're at, is going to eat them. This is a huge surge in protein sources that doesn't exist in most years. Turkeys, other birds, they all swoop in and start gobbling these up. We see squirrels, foxes, snakes. There's a researcher at Eastern Kentucky University that works on copperheads and periodical cicadas, Dr. Richter. These are all just going to come in and gobble these up. But eventually, just like if you ate pizza every day for 2 weeks, like a college student, you would probably not want to see pizza for a while. These organisms will also get tired of the cicadas and they'll move on. And the cicadas that emerge later in the summer, they're going to have a higher probability, therefore, of surviving to mate and produce the next generation. So you come out by the billions because you know millions of you are going to die and be eaten, but some of you will survive to create the next generation. These ones, as I've alluded to, have been underground sucking on sap for 13 or 17 years. They drink it through a straw-like mouthpart, a needle-like mouthpart that they plunge into the tree. They eat so slowly and so little that they never really impact the health of the tree as a nymph, but they're going to start to come up above ground to molt and then become adults. So this mass emergence usually begins at the start of May. This year we saw it happen at the end of April. We can attribute that to perhaps some climatic variability, to put it gently. But they start usually around then, and this usually lasts until the end of June. You'll see some slow ones that come out maybe around July 4th, but usually by the end of June, everything is wrapped up. This typically coincides with the full bloom of irises in an area. When the irises are in full bloom, that's when the periodical cicadas start to crawl up out of the soil. When they do this, they leave behind these holes in the ground. You can see them here on the left. They also sometimes construct a mud chimney around themselves as they do this, just because it helps to keep them kind of moist before they fully come up out of the ground. This is a video that I received from Extension Agent Kelly Jackson in Christian County. This was towards the end of April. He found some that were staging themselves, or had a client send this in. They were staging themselves under a rock in the landscape. They'll kind of wait, and then when the temperature is just right, they'll start to pull themselves up. And what they'll do is they'll find somewhere to molt in order to become an adult. Many people have seen annual cicada shells on trees over the summer. This is a periodical cicada performing the same thing. So they just pull their new body out of their old body, essentially. You're seeing it crack its back open, and then the adult cicada is pulling itself out of its former skin. This is a very arduous process. It's very fraught. There's a lot that can go wrong. You can get stuck. Things can get caught in your old exoskeleton and hurt you. You're very easy to eat at this point because you can't really move. So lots of them get gobbled up here. Your wings could be damaged by other cicadas touching them before they're ready. Entomologists may come by and collect you. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. So they try to do this in out of the way areas, sometimes try to do it at night as well, just so that they're not seen by other things. Once they're fully molted, they will take to the upper canopy of trees and begin to sing. The adults live for 4 to 6 weeks. They don't really eat much as adults. They're only really around to mate. I like to joke that this is kind of a huge macabre Mardi Gras, because these cicadas, they jam a lot. They sing a lot of songs, they make a lot of noise, they make a lot of music, and they're doing a lot of other things that end up with babies, basically, just like at Mardi Gras. They are mating and they're trying to make that next generation. So the males are the only ones that sing. They're the ones that are creating these loud noises that they're famous for. The females do click their wings. They don't sing though. They can make a wing noise if they accept the courtship ritual that the male presents. But mostly this is dudes who are making a ton of noise. We've all been in bars across Kentucky. We know how gentlemen can act. And these are just making a lot of raucous noise, trying to attract first each other to a tree, other males, and then attract females to the tree. They can do this because most of their abdomen is hollow. There's not a lot inside of there. And up next to the wings, you can see it in this GIF here. There's this silvery kind of area. This is a timbal membrane, which they can flex really fast, and it produces a clicking noise that then reverberates around inside of them. And then they can then release the noise. They're doing this hundreds of times per second. And the noise comes out as these really loud clicking or shrill noises that we're familiar with. When these sing in concert, this sound can reach around 100 decibels. And so it's really, really loud. It's really, really impressive. One thing that I wanted to try to do here. All right, sharing sound now. So on the next ones, I'm going to try and play some sounds. I hope you'll let me know if it doesn't quite work, and I'll try again. But I thought that this could be interesting. So if you're listening on headphones, just know that loud cicada noises are about to occur. So this is a call for attention. This is a male cicada that's up in a tree. This is it here. So he's trying to say, come to my tree. This is the best tree. My tree's the best. Come on over here, bros. And then we're going to sing in a chorus. Once they get together, the chorus is going to synchronize. And this is them saying, hey, ladies, like this, we're the best band. Come over to this tree and hang out with us. So this is what's really loud. It comes in these surges and waves. So this is what's really, really loud. It can drive some people crazy. It attracts females to the tree. When the females get together in the tree, when the females get to the tree, they are going to sing a courtship song. So here's a courtship song. I can feel the romance. I don't know about you all, but this sounds like Marvin Gaye to me, frankly. So there's that ticking noise that I was kind of referring to earlier. If the female accepts his courtship ritual, if she appreciates his song, she'll click her wings and then the mating will begin. I also wanted to share that there is a distress call. If you pick these cicadas up, they'll make a very angry noise at you. So those were several cicada swear words there. Put me down, you blankety blank, basically. So they're able to make multiple noises like this, as I've been sharing with you. They are using these to communicate with one another and to try and get certain points across. Once they mate, the male, he pretty quickly is going to perish. He doesn't last very long after that. The female can persist for a couple of weeks after the mating, and that's because she needs to lay the eggs. She has about 400 to 600 eggs inside of her body that she needs to fertilize and then lay in the tree. And they do this in batches of about 2 dozen. In order to lay the eggs, the female has an ovipositor. It's this sword-like object that you see extending out of the abdomen here. Hers is pointed at the tip, and so she uses this to slice into the thin bark of twigs in the upper canopy of the tree, and then she injects the eggs down in there. These are the eggs here. There's a close-up of them. They look like really thin, slivery grains of rice. Once she does this, she'll go along and cut another slit. She may fly to another tree, but they all start to lay eggs on top of each other. We're talking about millions and millions of insects here. And so there becomes a problem for some trees where they're so overloaded with these slits that the twig in front of, or where the slits are, and then behind it, there will be a breakage. So the twig becomes really weak and it falls over in the tree. We call this flagging. And you'll see big trees out in the landscape. They'll have hundreds of these flags, thousands of these flags in the canopy, and they can handle it. Like this big oak tree that you see here, this is not a problem. This tree is going to be fine. It looks kind of weird and funky to us, but they're going to be totally fine with this. Oaks are one of their preferred resources for oviposition and for nymphal development. Oaks are so long-lived, they're so prolific that it's something that they tend to use a lot, but they'll also pop up on elms, maples, ash, if you still got them, and then fruit trees. And that's where we start to run into some problems. They can harm fruit trees. They can harm newly transplanted trees. The smaller and weaker it is, the more damage this flagging can do. When they hatch out of the branch, they'll drop to the soil and burrow down in. This is a brand new baby cicada that you're seeing here, and they'll do this long work towards adulthood. If you're worried about this, you can put netting on your trees. We encourage you to do it as the males first start to sing, and you leave it on there usually till the end of June. Cicada netting is available online. Sometimes hardware stores in areas with emergencies will start to stock it. It's a little more expensive than bird netting, but if you have a brand new oak tree that you just put into the landscape, if you have an orchard or a small orchard, small group of fruit trees that you'd like to protect, this is the way to go. There are some guides with insecticides out there for large scale orchard owners, but on the small scale, at the homeowner scale, we encourage this physical approach to pest control using the netting. The final thing I'll mention is that humans and pets can consume cicadas safely. We get this question very frequently. The only caveats here are if you're allergic to shellfish, you should not eat cicadas. If you're allergic to cockroaches, you should also avoid consuming them. There will be some cross allergy symptoms there, and you should consume them in moderation. Same goes for your dog or for your cat. They have been underground for 13 or 17 years. They can accumulate contaminants that have accrued in the soil as well. So just don't eat, a big bucket of cicadas every day for lunch for the next 2 months. If you just have a few, you're going to be fine. They are quite tasty, typically are going to taste like whatever you cook them in, but on their own, they kind of have a nutty flavor, I would say.
Oh, that was a good one. Yeah.
I don't know about eating cicada.
I've seen her, the look on her face when you showed that picture.
Yeah, I was like, no.
I've done it.
Peanuts, I'm okay.
I've done it. It doesn't taste too bad. I can understand the initial sort of feeling of revulsion, but I got to eat them for a TV show a couple of years ago with Brood X, and mine were cooked with like tuna and rice, or they were candied and mulberries. So they were extra special tasty, but on their own, yeah, they kind of have a nutty, think about anything that eats on trees. They have that kind of woody, nutty flavor to them.
Yeah, no doubt. I really appreciate your presentation there, Dr. Larson. That was really good. I also really appreciate you putting on there about the flagging. I know we get a lot of calls, here in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources Extension related to that flagging. What's wrong with my tree? What's going on with it? So appreciate you putting that out there so everybody will know. It was a great
really
segment.
great. Yeah, it really was a great segment.
So informative. So I was trying to think about how they do that counting. Is it through like degree days somehow, or some version of degree days?
It really is just this like logging of the tree sap coming and going. It's just this biological kind of clock, and it's a machine. So like the number of times that happens, then all of a sudden it's like ding, it initiates this behavior to go above ground. Yeah.
Fascinating. It really is. I mean, you do such a great job of showing us so much about the natural world that many of us kind of overlook or maybe have a lot of questions about, but I can't thank you enough for really your presentations, and your style is great. You're very creative and very educational.
I appreciate it.
Couple of questions that have popped in, and they wanted to know if you needed support for the netting.
No, usually it just goes over the small tree, and then you kind of tie it in a knot at the midpoint of the tree, kind of like a lollipop. So you just want to make it nice and tight there, but we don't see anybody putting a skeleton of some sort to keep the netting up. The tree itself kind of keeps the netting off of the tree. Are there preferred tree species? Yeah, oak, and then fruit trees. I would say those are the ones that we seem to get the most questions about. Yeah. I know oak is not a species. I know it's not super specific, but yes, any of the oaks are going to be popular.
We've got a lot of them here in Kentucky. Yes.
kinds.
You know, it looks like even next year is going to be a much bigger deal, I guess, as far as cicadas go across the state. So, yeah, well, I'm sure
I'll have you on next year at this time. Stay
everybody
tuned.
like, what's going on?
Right.
We're talking to some FCS agents about putting a cookbook out on them, so look forward to that.
Oh,
Very
I might have you talk about that and then someone come on and talk about how to cook them.
There you
So
Okay, as long as I get to wear a chef's hat, I'm into it.
you go for it. You can cook them as far as I'm concerned. You're in your office and we're over here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Dr.
We really
Larson. Really
appreciate it.
appreciate you. Oh, good.
Yeah, that's good.
He is so educational and entertaining.
He really is. And, coming up next, we have Dr. Ellen Crocker.
Yeah.
She's going to be talking about what's bugging our tree, but she has
Oh,
also
yes.
eaten cicadas.
So, all right. So, Dr. Larson gave us his take on cicadas. So, what's your take on cicadas?
I recommend them. They're
There we
great.
go.
Yeah, I got
Now,
nothing but good things to say. Now, if you fry anything, it's probably going to taste pretty good. But yeah, 2 thumbs up for cicadas in my book.
I will take Dr. Crocker's endorsement then.
I don't know about that cicada on a stick, though. I just not doing it.
You ought to see her face. It's amazing. Yes.
All right. Cicada party.
Yeah.
Someone just, yeah.
All right. So,
All right. Let's get back to your
yes,
segment. Okay.
it is a lot going on with trees right now this time of year. So, you're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
So what's
The
bugging-
leaves are out. Now,
What's bugging it,
so
Ellen?
too are all sorts of weird fungal things going on with the leaves of your trees. So there's a lot going on right now, especially as wet as it has been. And it's going to be, I expect we're going to see a lot more fungal leaf issues, little spots and things like that on leaves. For the most part, these are not kind of a major cause for concern. So that's a good thing. But it's important to be able to distinguish, what's going on and what are the different things. So today I'm going to share a video about one of those that is very common right now, anthracnose. And we can talk more about whatever else people are seeing in their trees as well. Lots of different things this time of year.
Anthracnose is a common fungal disease of shade trees. It pops up each year in the spring and can look pretty bad with trees that have dead leaves, dark patches on them, and trees might even drop all their leaves. However, while this looks bad, those trees typically bounce back and there's very minimal damage to those trees, although there are some exceptions. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about what anthracnose is, how to recognize it, and what you can do about it. Anthracnose is a general name for the disease that's caused by a group of fungal pathogens. And the type of disease that it causes is typically in the leaves. So it might cause dead patches in those leaves, typically right along a vein and spreading out from there, kind of where you'd imagine water pooling. It might also cause distortion of those leaves, cupping or curling, weirdly shaped leaves. Because of this, trees might drop their leaves. And in some plants, some tree species, it can also move into the branches, into those shoots and those buds. In those cases, it typically causes more damage because not only is it impacting those leaves, but also that new growth, which is very important. There are some things that can look similar to anthracnose from other fungal diseases that pop up this time of year to more serious issues, and being able to tell them apart is really important. So if you have any questions about whether what you're seeing is anthracnose or if it's something else, be sure to reach out to your local extension agent or local arborist. Many different trees get anthracnose, from sycamores to oaks to maples to smaller trees like dogwood. It's a really wide range, and the type of disease that's caused depends on both the species of fungus and the tree species that it's on. There are actually lots of different anthracnose species that cause this disease, and they tend to be pretty host specific. So it's unlikely that your disease in one tree is going to move to a different tree of a different species in your yard. Even though the symptoms might look the same, they're actually different species of fungi that are causing that. On some tree species, anthracnose is much more serious. Species like dogwood and sycamore. And a lot of times this comes because it will move into the shoots and not just stay on those leaves. Disease varies year to year, and how bad symptoms are is going to depend somewhat on the weather that we get in the spring. Fungi that cause anthracnose really like those wet, cool conditions. So if we've got a lot of those when leaves are coming out, you could expect to see more anthracnose. Those anthracnose fungi survive in buds, in shoots, in dead tissue, so that can spread those spores to the next generation of growth, overwintering that way so that then they can infect that fresh tissue the following spring. In most cases, there's no management that's needed for anthracnose. Although things might look bad, those trees recover rapidly, and the damage tends to be pretty cosmetic. Sometimes trees will even drop all their leaves and put on a new flush of leaves if they have a really severe infection. And while that's a good strategy for those trees, it can also stress those trees because that's a drain on their energy. So if that's happening year after year, it could be something that contributes to the overall decline of those trees. As with many different tree issues, promoting the health of your trees in general will go a long way to enabling them to defend themselves against anthracnose as well as other diseases and insect problems. This could be watering your trees if you have a severe drought, making sure that they have a nice, appropriately sized mulch ring around them. Sanitation, or removing any infected tissue, diseased tissue, can be helpful with many different fungal diseases because that's how the disease is going to infect next year's tissue. So if you want to kind of break that cycle, remove those infected shoots, in some cases, there are some really good cultivars available that are resistant to anthracnose. If you're shopping around for trees for your landscape, think about that and maybe select a cultivar or a species that's going to be more resistant to anthracnose, especially if you see a lot of damage on your other trees. You might have something about that environment that's really conducive to anthracnose, and so promoting trees that don't have that issue will go a long way to set you up for success down the road. For some species like dogwood and sycamore that are really susceptible to anthracnose, site selection can go a long way. So picking a site that's sunny, that has good drainage, that's not going to hold a lot of moisture in there because that's how that fungus likes to spread. Similarly, it may be beneficial to prune trees to promote air circulation, especially on trees that are being really impacted by anthracnose, so that you've got more circulation and less moisture held on those leaves. Other practices that might increase leaf moisture, especially during that early time window, like let's say watering with a sprinkler, should also be discouraged if you're having anthracnose issues, to reduce that moisture and the spread of that fungus. While typically not needed, there are many fungicides that are available for anthracnose, and there's many different brand names and active chemicals, so make sure you check out the labels and always follow the recommendations on those. The fungicides that are registered for anthracnose typically have to be applied as a preventative, so before you start seeing symptoms that year, and they may need to be applied multiple times over the course of that infection period. It's not something that you can do once and be done with, but more something that you're going to have to watch and repeatedly apply until you're not seeing as severe symptoms. Thanks for joining me today with this tree tidbit and learning a little bit more anthracnose. If you've got other questions, make sure to follow us online and check us out on social media at KY Forest Health.
Right. Well, hopefully that gave everyone some good images of what to look for with anthracnose. I'm seeing it all around right now on a lot of different species, and it does look slightly different on different species and different settings. And the good news is, like in the forest setting, for most trees, even in their landscape setting, not something that is going to be a serious issue. Those trees will bounce back from that fine as long as everything else is going well with them.
So does it attack most trees, or is it like a specific one, or?
Well, so we call this type of disease anthracnose, but actually it's lots of different species of fungi that cause anthracnose and lots of different species of plants. So there is a little bit of host specificity there in terms of not being likely to spread to all of your plants. There are actually different species that are causing those symptoms that we're seeing. We call them all anthracnose because it's easier, but there's kind of more going on there in terms of the different species that are causing these symptoms.
Yeah, it's a very interesting and very timely topic. And as you said, we're seeing this occur in the landscape. And I know folks have questions about this. These are things we get questions often about. So really appreciate you putting that segment together, Dr. Crocker.
Yes.
Of course. And, I get calls about this. I've gotten some recently. People wanting to treat their trees now for that, because now is when you're seeing the problems on the leaves. And really, that's likely to be pretty ineffective. The time for treatment, those treatment windows are when those buds are swelling, when those leaves are first emerging. At this point, most of the leaf tissue is going to be less susceptible. Now, there is, I guess, some questions about what that's going to look like going forward. Many of if you're talking about a sycamore that's really, really infected with it, it's going to drop its leaves and put out another flush of new leaves here in the next little bit. So you don't want those next little leaves to get infected for sure. But I don't know how effective a fungicide would be in that scenario. We had a question about the bumps we see on some leaves in the forest. I think you're talking about galls, which typically are insect caused. And I know Dr. Larson is still on, but there are fungal galls, there are insect galls, there are some galls on trees that are just caused by trees growing a little bit more maybe around a wound. But most of the most eye-catching galls, I think, Jonathan, are in your camp. They're the insects, the coolest galls out there. Probably yours.
They are the coolest galls, it's true. With insects and mites, we see them create things. We typically name them after the shape that they create. So we have apple galls, bullet galls, nipple galls, finger galls, spindle galls. There's all bladder galls, and they're just in there. They're either a compound that the female produces as she lays the egg, induces the tree to kind of elongate cells around this area. They don't have an immune response, right? It's just sort of like, it's almost like a tumor. That's a little simplifying it, but the tree sort of walls off this invader, and the larval insect or the adult mite is very happy about this. It's free room and board, basically. So they just live inside of there and do quite well.
Interesting.
Yeah. And most of those are not a big deal for the health of the tree. If you think about something like oaks, I mean, one oak might have, what do you think, Jonathan? Like, you could look at one tree and see like 10 different types of galls on
oaks,
it, little leaf galls.
Oaks have like 300 different species of gall here in the United States that can be found on them. You can find them on the leaf, you can find them on the twigs. They just exist all over. And yeah, they just kind of shrug them off. The only exception with oaks is the horned oak gall, which can be a bigger issue, but is also kind of tied to overall decline of a tree. So definitely a lot of oak galls and then maple galls. And we have a few of the oaks and maples here in Kentucky, I would say.
Interesting how many galls on the oaks, and we heard before, I think you might have shared with us how many Lepidoptera species, rely on oaks. So I guess just reminder how important oaks are, not only to our economy and to all those people out there, but to a lot of other things in the world as well.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, they're biodiversity powerhouses, and part of that means that they're going to have insects all over them.
Yeah.
So whether we're talking galls or other things, they're excellent hosts to the many insects we want, as well as some we don't want, like those horned oak galls that Jonathan mentioned. Most of them, though, to answer that question, are not really hurting your tree. They're there, they're living, they're taking advantage of that resource, but they're unlikely to hurt it in the long term. I did see that we had a question about, I think, anthracnose on vegetables. Is it the same thing that's in your trees? And that's going to be, those are different species that are going to impact your vegetables in your garden versus your trees in your yard. So I don't think there's really any concern there about them spreading from one to the other.
All right, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you,
Good
Dr.
segment.
Crocker.
Yeah.
We really appreciate
Yeah.
you being on.
Yeah,
You are so welcome. I've also been seeing some oak blister to Phryna popping up, some maple leaf blister, all sorts of different things popping up, galls and more. So check out your tree's leaves and see what's going on, but just know that most of those things are probably pretty minor and your tree is going to be fine. But being able to distinguish those will help you understand, how can you be best managing to support their health.
Right.
excellent.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it.
Yes, as always.
Thanks
Great.
for having me on. And happy 200th show.
Yes.
Yeah, you've been a big part of it for
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
A
I love
wonderful
it.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate Dr. Larson and Dr.
Mhm.
Crocker. They've been on so many times and they just
Right.
got such great content, so much expertise, and the work that they're doing is so important to all of us here in Kentucky.
It
So,
really is. She had talked about
Excuse me.
if you see something in your woods, if you do and you're questioning it, you can go to fromthewoodstoday.com and we have this little survey link that you can click, and you can even upload a photo there if you see something that you're like, what is this? You never know. We might do a show about it.
No doubt, like we have before.
We have, yes.
Yeah, and I'll give you a quick little preview of next week. We're going to be talking
Mm-hmm.
about an opportunity if you want to learn more about woodlands and wildlife here in Kentucky. And we're going to be announcing the Woodland Owner Short Course. This is a great opportunity for you all. So join us next week as we talk more about that.
Definitely. And you'll be talking about that. And so I'm
Mhm.
looking forward to that
Yeah.
presentation. And you'll learn a whole lot of things during the Woodland Owner Short Course. And it's not just, we have online sessions, but you also can actually get in the field and learn about what you were taught, so that's kind of, practicing kind of what we're teaching. And I love that.
Yeah, hopefully it'll work out really well, and a lot of people will be able to attend and enjoy it because we're going to have a lot of professionals as part of this. So it's a
Definitely.
great opportunity to get a lot of questions.
So make sure you
answered.
tune in next week.
Yeah, we'll talk more about it.
Right.
But again, big thanks to Dr. Crocker, Dr. Larson for their outstanding segments, and Renee, what a pleasure being with you here on our 200th episode. And a big thanks to all of you, all that listen, whether it's on the podcast or you've joined our recordings. We really appreciate you, and we like being part of this community, and we thank you.
Yes, we really appreciate it. And we will see you next week
Yeah.
at 11 o'clock on Wednesday.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
From the woods today.